Hello, welcome back. Got a very esteemed guest today, an industry professional, managed to secure. He's been working for just about 12 years in the industry, maybe just under. And he's joined us here today to talk a bit about what he does, maybe some advice for some of the younger ones amongst us, and a bit just about the industry in general during the conversation.
A lot of advice for us, I should
Yeah,
think.
Definitely.
I think we're super happy and privileged to have you here with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me on your show, guys.
Yeah. So, why don't we just get right into it? So, where did you start out in terms of after uni? Where was your first experience in the industry?
Yeah, sure. So started off straight into banking, and this wasn't the kind of conventional route to the buy side, or at least to private equity. So started off in the global markets division as an intern, and did a summer internship for 2 months during that time. Was then made an offer to join the firm the following year, and started off in June that year in the equity research division. Started off working on the oil and gas team there, and then rotated into the tech team during my time there. I'd say it was a great overall experience, having gained exposure to different parts of the markets division. So during that time, I spent some time on the sales and trading floor, some time in the research division, and you've got a very strict Chinese wall in between the two. So it's not that you can just kind of move in and out as you wish. You've got to have kind of strict assignments between the two. And having experienced that on the market side, I then decided I wanted to see more of the corporate finance side, and decided to move across to an M&A team. And I spent 3 years at HSBC thereafter on the M&A team working on transactions. That was cross-sector and really interesting experience. Great to see both sides of the investment banking world. And I think they gave me kind of unique intro into then moving across to the buy side.
Ah, that's super interesting. I mean, the first question I wanted to ask you was, I mean, you obviously joined just after 2008 in the wake of the whole crisis. How do you think the job market then compares to now, people coming out of uni into like graduate schemes and employment?
I'd say, well, I think similar in terms of there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think during that period there's also a lot of uncertainty. Then, with hindsight, we can see that there was a lot of growth in the years thereafter, and it was a great time to kind of be in banking or to be in the finance world. I hope that's the case going forward from here. I think it's not easy at the moment to start off and to find a job in that world. But I think there's opportunity for those that work hard and are able to kind of differentiate themselves from the crowd. So I'd say it's an interesting time for sure.
I mean, from my point of view, I think there are a lot of people watching this who might be wondering about applying in different places and trying to sort of fit themselves into the frame of an ideal applicant. And so from your perspective, having worked at a lot of these places which they're trying to apply to, what would you say are the ideal sort of characteristics and traits that these employers would want to see?
I think first of all, academics. So having a strong track record on the academic side, and I think that's always a good starting point. And I think the next thing would be, I think writing skills are very important. So being able to convey what you have on your CV into a story on your cover letter, and to be able to kind of stand out from the crowd. So they're obviously getting hundreds of thousands of these CVs, and it's not easy to stand out from the crowd when you're writing a one-page letter. But I think that's important, and then I think also interpersonal skills. So you're going to have several rounds of interviews, and they're going to try and put you on the spot and make you feel uncomfortable during those moments to test you under pressure. And I think being able to deliver the message in person is important as well. So.
Yeah. And obviously, I mean, I guess, I don't know if it was unexpected when you first went in, but I've definitely heard from a lot of people that like office skills, PowerPoint, Excel is something that's hugely focused on. in your experience, would you say that that constituted a lot of your work in the first few years? And would you say those skills are very important for any prospective applicant?
Yeah, I'd definitely say so. So I'd say Excel. Excel is probably the most important. It depends also on whether you're joining, say, a global markets team or a M&A team within investment banking. So on the M&A side, I'd say a cool part of the job is modeling, and having a knowledge of Excel is essential to be able to do that. I think on the global market side, you've obviously got the split between sales and trading, and then equity research and fixed income research. I'd say modeling is essential on the research side, and if you're joining a sales and trading team, less relevant. I'd say PowerPoint is essential across the board, so having that skill set is important. And yeah, I think PowerPoint's essentially just being able to deliver interesting slides based on the analysis, and yeah, I think.
And so for PowerPoint, do you feel like it's more of a technical skills thing, or more of an actually being able to convey an idea as a person? I mean, I feel like interpersonal skills would link very, very well into how you're able to portray information on a slide.
Yeah, I think it depends on what stage you're at. So starting at the very bottom of the food chain within the banking team, I think you don't get straight away to, or at least when I started, you didn't get straight away to be able to deliver what's on the slides in person and voice them over. So I think it's important at that stage to really put something interesting on the slide.
Right.
But then obviously as you grow, I think that's something which you then need to learn and be able to actually communicate what's on the slide to a wider audience. So
Yeah. And I'm interested, obviously you're in the highly sought after positions on the buy side, in a sort of private equity style in-house investments. But I want to know, where do you see the future of like investment banking? I mean, you obviously started out there. There's still like a flood of applicants coming in each year. Do you think that will persist on, or do you think they will generally transition out? And also, as a quick follow-up to that, do you think that what do you think is the best avenue for someone trying to make the transition across?
yeah, I think yeah, as you say, investment banking is traditionally the route into the buy side. So you tend to need to do, say, 2 to 3 years of analyst experience within a investment banking role, and then leverage that into moving across the buy side. I think it's a lot harder to be able to join the buy side straight out of university or from a master's program. But having said that, it does happen, so I wouldn't rule that out either. I think from my experience, the best path is to do approximately 2 years of investment banking. And if you want to go specifically to the private equity world, I think you want to be either in the leverage finance side or on the M&A side. If you want to move into hedge funds, then they also recruit out of equity research or sales and trading. So it really depends where on the buy side you want to be. And I think that path isn't changing as yet. I think there is maybe more optionality also, depending on whether you're joining a large cap firm on the buy side or a smaller mid-market firm. I think if you're joining the latter, it's easier to make that move later on in your career. If you want to join the Blackstones of this world and the other large cap names, I think you need to make that move, say, 2 to 3 years into investment banking.
And do you think, so I mean, you mentioned that PE firms tend to recruit out of leveraged finance and M&A. Why do you think that is versus sort of, equity and sales and trading? Is it just a bias from the people who are recruiting, or is it actually the skill set is more aligned to what you'd require in private equity?
I think it's the skill. It's really the skill set. So I think working in M&A, leverage finance, and you tend to get a good grasp of modeling, and then working on delivering decks of PowerPoint slides, which essentially are outputs of the modeling and valuation analysis you're doing. I think that experience is very valuable. Leverage finance in particular, given that a lot of these private equity outfits are borrowing significant amounts of debt in order to finance the acquisitions, I think having the leverage finance knowledge from the sell side is really useful. And then I think it's also transactional experience. So having knowledge of a process from start to finish, and that can be either on the buy side as an advisor to the potential acquirer, or on the sell side as an advisor to the seller. So I think that's really useful as well.
And just in terms of, I mean, a lot of people who are looking to go into banking, one of the primary reasons, I mean, there's no skirting around it, is where the money's involved. And so, just generally within these big organizations, particularly the big multinational firms, how do you see over the next sort of 5-10 years the kind of income being distributed across the different areas, if you see what I mean?
Do you mean specifically within private equity or more within?
Actually, I mean, we can do both. So, I mean, first of all, just within sort of investment banks, between the different divisions. I mean, I have heard that, in particularly things like equity research, the compensation has been going down massively over the last sort of 10 years. And that, for example, this year in 2020, apparently in M&A, that it was very, very strong. So I was wondering what your thoughts are on the future of that.
Yeah, I think it's as you say, it can be very cyclical. I think this year in particular, as you say, sales and trading has done very well. I think there's been a lot of volatility on the markets and a lot of trading volumes. I think compensation-wise, it varies year to year, but I think in M&A you tend to see less volatility. So I think deal flow comes and goes, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of emphasis on attracting talent, and I think you need to be paying a certain level of compensation to sustain that and attract the best people. I think sales and trading, similar in terms of focus on attracting talent, but I think there is a little more volatility given in terms of performance. So it really depends on how the market's moving and whether you're able to deliver alpha on that. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested also. I'd say I think there's also been a lot of interest from people who were maybe in investment banking and were thinking of transitioning across to not just going to PE, maybe into like venture capital style. I mean, would you say that that's definitely one of the trends right now? And why do you think venture capital is such a popular way? Like, what do you think are the advantages compared to like traditional PE or more of your, say, style work?
I think venture capital is a very interesting area. I think probably one of the reasons would be there's a lot of emphasis now on growth coming out of the tech sector, and venture capital is big focus of it is investing in these early stage tech companies or business with a tech angle, and so I think that's a natural growth area. I think venture capital's probably a less traditional or less well-known area of the buy-side market. I think people tend to go into private equity as kind of a default option. But I think venture capital as a result has a more open kind of entry as opposed to. So I think you can actually get into venture capital from less conventional backgrounds than private equity, or at least that's my experience. So I think if you have, say, experience working in a startup or in a corporate, I think you can leverage that into a VC role more easily than doing so on a private equity role.
I was actually gonna, just following off on that. There's a lot of individuals in VC who I've met who've either had their own company which has been funded through VC in a startup sense, or have for example worked in a very specialized role, for example in law or in medicine. A lot of guys who are previously doctors who then decide they want to make the transition can it seems they're able to easily go into VC. Is that something you don't see at all in private equity? So would you not see, say, a top level guy coming from the automotive industry being able to transition into a PE role?
I think you do see it, but it's less conventional. I think you tend to see it more often in the sector specialist private equity firms. So you'll find a lot of, for example, healthcare focused private equity firms where you need a kind of deep industry knowledge and
Yeah.
deep knowledge of the products that are being produced by these companies to succeed. And I think there, someone with an industry background can be really helpful. And you do see it, I think you tend to see it more at the senior level.
Right.
And I guess that's natural in the sense that people need some experience previously, and it's very unlikely that you're doing 2 years experience in a healthcare corporate and then moving across. I think you need more of a track record.
The talent pool is probably a lot smaller to hire from as well at that level.
Yeah.
And then I think we have to go change the camera soon. We can cut this bit out. But the last thing I was going to just quickly ask is, I've heard you've had some experience working in firms of different sizes, and I think especially for the ourselves and the people who are listening to this who are looking to go into a lot of these roles, a lot of them have been going through summer internship cycles, spring analyst cycles. Would you say there are also opportunities available in smaller firms, and how do they compare to the larger ones?
Yeah, I'd say there is a big difference, especially on the recruitment side with these firms. I think what tends to happen is, people coming straight out of university will tend to join larger firms and then leverage that experience into then moving across into a smaller firm. I think it does happen that you join a smaller firm, but these firms tend to have less resources and less of an emphasis on graduate programs.
Right.
Less kind of back office functions and in-house resources to be able to provide great training for junior people. So I think personally, having worked at one of the large firms straight out of university, I think that was really helpful training for myself. And having then moved to a smaller firm later on, I'm happy that I made that move in that order rather than the other way around, because I think the training available in a smaller firm is significantly less.
Right, okay, interesting.
You're kind of expected to have that skill set before you make that move.
And are you then able to sort of, coming with a sort of great educational background in the industry, are you then able to convert that into, say, a role with more responsibility and more scope for, I guess, moving up the food chain in these smaller firms?
Yeah, I think so. So I think at a certain point, having had that experience within a larger firm, personally, I found it really helpful to move to a smaller firm because being given a lot more responsibility, able to see a lot of different areas of, say, a transaction or the deal you're looking at. In the larger firms, you're one of, say, 100 people working on something, and it tends to be very kind of fragmented in terms of workload. So you'll be an expert in one particular area, but you won't know what's going on in another area of the transaction.
I see.
All right, so just going back in, something that I'm very interested in is obviously as a uni student currently, there's a lot of talk about like spring weeks, summer internships, then following off the back of that. And obviously this year has been upheaval, are they going to be online, not online? I mean, how important would you say spring weeks and summer internships, maybe as a follow-on, are for then a view into investment banking? Or view into finance in general?
Yeah, good question. So I would say they are incredibly important. So what tends to happen is, so I think the spring week is a very important stepping stone into summer internship. And I think the summer internship is the key to securing a job straight out of university. So what tends to happen, or at least what tended to happen when I started off working, was you did 1 year at uni, and then in the second year, you applied for a summer internship, and that would take place in the second summer of your university. And you'd then be made an offer to join the firm the following year if you were successful. So if you did it well, you'd end up going into the third year of uni with a job in your hand. And that obviously, that makes life a lot easier in the final stretch of university. And it's a natural kind of feeding process to get into these graduate schemes.
And actually, just off the back of that, a lot of spring weeks this year are going to be held online. In fact, I think the majority of them are. The only firm I've heard of that's still trying to do an in-person one is Morgan Stanley. How do you think this is going to affect how they can select candidates and whether they still place that same focus on spring week and summer internships? Because I mean, a lot of summer internships, I assume, are going to be happening online. And I've heard from other people in the industry that there's just these interns that will log onto these calls and just sit there at home on Zoom trying to kind of get an input. It's not the same thing as being there in the room. How do you feel that was going to affect it?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very strange outcome for these. I mean, I think it's strange for the firms and for the people actually doing the internships. I think already last year you had some kind of, you had some process around a virtual internship. I think this year will be a little more organized in that sense, so it won't be as experimental. I think it's going to be harder to kind of build that human interaction, which is important in order to actually get people to push for you to get an offer.
Yeah.
And also harder to stand out from the crowd because you're
just a face on a screen.
Yeah, you're just a face on a screen. But I think at the same time, it's the way the world is working at the moment, and I think being able to adapt is important. And I think that it's probably going to be this way for the next year at least. And I think everyone will look back at this time and say, okay, everyone was in the same boat, and there's time to catch up on the more human aspects of say an internship once you actually join the firm and build those relationships. So.
Yeah. And I guess also, I mean, in terms of differentiating yourself from other applicants, what would you say, I mean, in the spring week level, but also on just a CV level, what would you say are the most important ways to try and achieve that?
Well, I think the first thing is to actually apply, because I think having the knowledge of things like spring week and having knowledge of the various deadlines isn't as simple as many people think it is. I remember a lot of people not being as organized as they should be while I was at university and just missing those deadlines as a result. And I think it's quite easy to do as a student as well. You're not necessarily in the frame of mind where you've got to kind of hit deadlines as you would when you're working in a full-time job. Obviously, you have a lot of pressure, but in different ways, or at least more flexibility. So I think having strong organization skills is important to actually get the deadlines.
Especially if the applications are on a rolling basis, which it's a lot of them are. Versus if they review everything after a deadline, then you can apply the day before, and you've got the same chance as a guy who's applied 2 months earlier. But if you're applying for a role where they're filling it rolling, if you apply the day before the deadline, you might not have any space anymore.
Yeah. Okay. So that's 100% right then. I think getting early in the door is important. And then I think also being able to craft. So when I was applying, it was just crafting this one-page cover letter. That it's very hard to stand out in it, but being able to put something different on paper or on an email at least, and sending that across. And then I think having a strong knowledge and understanding of certain aspects of the financial markets or of the M&A world, and being able to deliver that as well. I think that's important. So for people to actually see that you're really interested in the financial markets as opposed to just, say, chasing a bit of money or...
Yeah. I mean, sort of, finally, the other thing that I was interested in, I mean, as opposed to just a cover letter, do you think there are any experiences on your CV that are more interesting or make you a more interesting candidate? Like if you've traveled on an internship somewhere, or I don't know, linguistic experience, and I don't know, various different options on your CV that you can leverage?
Yeah, I think the first thing is, well, if you're at a top university, LSE for example, or UCL, Bocconi, all of these guys, they all have a lot of extracurricular activities which allow you to kind of get something on your CV and get the point across that you're interested in finance outside of the classroom. So if it's say an investment club or even a discussion forum where you can chat about financial markets, or for example even a great thing is a podcast. Setting up a regular discussion forum where you can talk about aspects of the financial markets and financial world. I think that gives people a strong sense that you have a deep interest in what you're saying you actually want to do. So I think that's one aspect where you can really stand out.
So I think we should wrap this segment here. Thank you so much for coming. And I think it's really interesting. I mean, for us, me and Dave, prospective applicants, but also just for anyone. I mean, the industry is changing and constantly, and having someone on the inside, behind enemy lines, showing us the ropes, I think is super cool. And yeah, I mean, Dave.
No, thank you very, very much. It's been super insightful. I'm sure we'll get lots of feedback about how awesome this has been. And yeah, we hope to have you back another time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, guys, for having me, and I hope to be back soon as well.
Perfect.